The archive was in the east wing, past the stairs nobody used anymore. I had not been in that corridor since Myra died. I told myself it was the archivist's arrangement that kept me away. The woman the border settlement had sent to catalog the old volumes before winter made the roads impassable. I told myself it was simply that I had no reason to go that direction, that the east wing held nothing I required. But I am a king, and I have been a wolf long enough to know when I am telling myself a comfortable lie. She had arrived on the 3rd of harvest fall, on a gray morning with rain coming in off the pines. I had watched from the upper window out of nothing more than the habit of watching everything that entered my gates. She was small against the wagon, bundled in a plain brown traveling cloak, and she carried her own bags without waiting for anyone to help. She did not look up at the hold the way newcomers did, measuring it, calculating its impression. She looked at the door, and then she went through it, and that was all. Aldrich II had overseen her settling. I had signed the arrangement through him, as I signed most things that winter at a remove, through layers of other people who were better at being in rooms than I was. The archive needed cataloging. Someone in the settlement knew her work. The terms were simple: 30 days, a small wage, the East Wing quarters. "She'll be no trouble," Aldrich had said, in the tone he used when he was hoping I would believe something I had no reason to believe. "Quiet sort, keeps to herself." I had not answered. I had not needed to. Sira had stopped speaking 12 months before. She had been 4 when Myra died, and she had spoken as all children speak, constantly, eagerly, with opinions on everything from the color of the dining cloth to the names of each of my wolves' pups. And then one morning she had simply stopped, the way a fire stops when the air has gone out of the room, and no healer, no elder, no amount of patience or careful love had started her again. She was not ill. She was not unreachable. She would come to me in the evenings and press herself against my side and hold my hand with both of hers, and her eyes were bright and aware, and sometimes she would laugh, a small, private laugh, soundless, at something only she saw. But she did not speak. The healers called it grief, sealed inside. The Wolfelders called it the mate bond echo, a child who had felt her mother's wolf go dark and had simply closed around the loss. They said time and more time. They said patience. I had been patient. I was very good at patience now. It was the only discipline I had left that felt like strength and not absence. What I was not good at was the evening hour, when the hold grew quiet enough that I could hear how much was missing from it. I had learned to fill that hour with work, correspondence, border reports, the trading ledgers Aldrich left on my table each night. I filled it until I was too tired to hear the quiet anymore, and then I slept, and in the morning I governed, and that was what my life had become. Contained, purposeful, a long, careful management of everything I was not feeling. My wolf was quiet too, in the way he had been quiet since Myra died, not absent, but withdrawn, the way a wolf goes when there is nothing to hunt and nothing to guard, and the season is wrong. I had stopped expecting him to stir. On her 4th day, I came down the main stair at dawn and found 3 of the hold's wolves sitting outside the east wing door. Not circling, not restless. Sitting, the settled, deliberate sit of wolves who have found where they want to be and have decided to be there. Soot, the old gray female, was in the center. She had been Myra's wolf's closest companion once. I had not seen her choose a position voluntarily in months. I stood at the bottom of the stair and looked at them for a long moment. Soot looked back at me. Her tail moved once. I went to breakfast. I did not mention it to Aldrich. But I noted it. I'm a king, I note things. I first saw her with Sira on the 9th day. I had not sought it out. I had come to the east corridor for a reason I could not now recall. Something about a map case that Aldrich had placed near the archive for her reference. And I had come around the corner to find my daughter sitting in the window embrasure at the far end of the hall, tucked against the stone like a bird on a branch, watching the woman at the reading table below. Nara had not noticed me. She was working open volume spread before her, a small wooden cataloging frame on her left, her handwriting moving steadily across the record sheets. She worked the way she had carried her bags on that first morning, without performance, without self-consciousness, as if no one were watching and it did not matter if they were. Her hair was pinned back simply. She wore the same plain gray working dress she had worn every morning I had glimpsed her in the corridor. She was not beautiful in the way the council had, over the past year, suggested beauty, as though beauty were a remedy for something. She was present, entirely present, the kind of stillness that does not come from trying. Sira slipped down from the embrasure. I stayed very still. She crossed the room on her small bare feet and climbed, uninvited, onto the bench beside the woman. I had told everyone on the staff, do not force her. Do not make her go anywhere, do not require her to speak, do not engineer small moments designed to unlock her. She would know. Children who have sealed themselves know manufactured warmth from genuine warmth, and Sira had become very accurate at the difference. Nara looked down at her and did not speak either. After a moment she shifted the volume she was working from so it angled toward Sira as well, not entirely, just enough to say, "Here, if you want to see." And then she went back to her notation, and Sira looked at the page, and neither of them said anything. I went back the way I had come. I stood in the corridor with one hand against the cold stone wall, and something in my chest moved in a way I did not immediately recognize, because I had not felt it in a year. My wolf stirred that night. Not much. A small movement, the way a sleeping wolf's paws move in a dream, a single pulse of attention in the dark, directed at nothing I could name. I was at the ledger table and I set down my pen and I sat with it, trying to locate it, trying to understand what had snagged him. I could not find it. He settled again. I went back to the ledgers. But I noted it. The days that followed were ordinary, and I began to dread them slightly, which told me something. I found reasons to pass the East Corridor. I did not invent reasons. I am not a man who invents reasons. But I accepted reasons I would previously have delegated. The map case genuinely did need retrieval, and the old treaty volumes in the archive pertained to a border matter Aldrich had raised, and the east window gave the clearest view of the wolves' morning runs on the Pine Ridge, which was information I sometimes required. I accepted these reasons with dignity, and I passed the archive door, and sometimes it was closed, and sometimes it was open, and when it was open I heard the quiet, methodical sound of her work. On the 14th day, I heard her reading aloud. She must have found the Caldenmore Chronicle in the deep shelves, the old volume of pack histories, the one written in a dialect half our younger wolves could not read. She was reading from it slowly, feeling out the older forms of the words, not performing the reading but working through it, the way you work through a translation when the meaning genuinely interests you. Her voice was low. It did not carry far, but the door was open and I was close and I heard it. Sira was beside her again. My daughter's face was upturned. She was listening the way she used to listen to Myra's stories, the total, absorbed quality of a child who has gone entirely inside a sound. I stood in the corridor for too long. I made myself move. That night the mate mark on my wrist was warm. Not burning, not the sudden, consuming ignition the elders described, the bonfire that declared itself without permission, that a man could not mistake for anything else. Just warm. A gentle, persistent warmth, low and steady, the way an ember holds its heat long after the flame is gone. I had carried this mark since birth. Every Alpha King of Caldenmore did the mark that waited, they said, for the one it was made to recognize. Myra's mark had been different. A silver line, cool, chosen through the old ceremony, the proper mate bond of alliance and pack agreement. What I carried was older than that. Bloodline old. Most kings of my line went to their graves with it never having woken. I told myself it was the fire in my chamber. I told myself it was the poor circulation that came with cold nights. I am a king, and I have been a wolf long enough to know when I am telling myself a comfortable lie. I spoke to her for the first time on the 17th day. Not in the archive. In the kitchen corridor early before the hold was fully awake. She was carrying a small tray, a cup of something warm, a single piece of bread, and she stepped back to let me pass, and I said, "The Chronicle, the Caldenmore volume, can it be read?" She looked at me with the directness of someone who has not been told to be careful around powerful men, or has been told and decided it was poor advice. Not boldness, exactly. Something quieter than boldness. She considered the question seriously, the way you consider a question that deserves a serious answer. "Most of it," she said. "There are 2 sections in the old mountain dialect that I'd want a second opinion on before I commit them to the record. The rest is sound. My grandmother used the mountain dialect. I can read some of it. Then I'll mark those sections for you." A pause, "if that would help." It would. She nodded once and moved past me, and that was the end of it. My wolf was fully awake the rest of the morning. I did not tell him to settle, that was new. The marked sections arrived on my table 2 days later, transcribed in her clean hand with the uncertain passages bracketed and her own best guess noted beneath each one. She had not asked Aldrich to deliver them. She had brought them herself, left them at the table edge while I was meeting with the border captain, with a small note. "The 3rd bracket on page 2 may be a place name rather than a title, I couldn't determine which. The valley reference on page 4 is probably Seldren's Crossing. En. En. Not the archivist, not with respect to the Alpha King, En." I read the passages. Her guesses were accurate. Her uncertainty on the 3rd bracket was correct. It was a place name and an obscure one. I wrote my confirmations in the margins and left the sheets on the archive table the following morning with a note of my own. 3rd bracket, a valley name, now Coldhaven Pass. 4th, correct. EA, my initials only. It felt like the right register. She sent back, "Thank you. I had Coldhaven Pass in mind but thought I was reaching." And then beneath it, small and as if she were not sure it was appropriate, "She's been coming every morning now. I hope that's all right." I knew without asking who she meant. I read the sentence 3 times. I wrote back, "It is more than all right." Aldrich found me in the upper corridor one evening toward the end of the 3rd week, with the expression he wore when he had decided to say something, and was managing the courage to say it. "The Pax noticed," he said. I waited. "Soot won't leave the East Wing. The 3 pups from the southern litter have started sleeping outside the archive door. Fell," he hesitated. "Fell laid a kill at the threshold this morning, the old gift offering. He hasn't done that for anyone since." He stopped himself. "Since Myra," I said. "Yes." The wolves of Caldenmore were old bloodline, same as my mark. They knew things before I did always. They had known Myra was fated before the ceremony was even arranged, had stood at the hall entrance when she first came through it with a calm that no amount of diplomacy had ever produced. They were not performing this. They were not being encouraged. They simply knew. "And the others?" I asked. "Watching," Aldrich said. "Waiting, I think." He looked at me. "She doesn't know any of it. I don't think she has any idea." "No," I said, "she wouldn't." That was part of it, I realized. That was the thing I had been trying to name. She had come here with no design. She had no reason to make herself agreeable to the Alpha King of Caldenmore. No awareness that she was doing anything other than her work, making friends with a small girl who didn't speak and noting down old territorial boundaries. She was not trying to be remarkable. She simply was, and it was more than all the careful, eligible, well-meaning women the council had paraded through my hall across an entire year of hopeful arrangement. That night the mate mark burned. Not warmth this time, not the low ember I had been explaining away for 2 weeks. It burned, clean and unmistakable, a silver-gold heat that ran from my wrist to my shoulder blade, and I sat up in the dark and held my arm and did not pretend it was the fire, because there was no fire left in the grate, and because I was finished with comfortable lies. I sat with it for a long time. My wolf was perfectly still, in the way he had not been still since Myra died, not withdrawn still, not the stillness of absence, but the stillness of a wolf who has finally found the direction of something and is simply pointing himself toward it, waiting for me to be ready. Now I asked him. He was patient with me. He had been patient for a year. He could wait a little longer. I went to the archive the next morning. Not for the passages, not for any reason I could have given Aldrich. I went because I was finished pretending I had other reasons. She was already at work, the morning light across the table, the Chronicle open beside a newer volume she was cross-referencing. She looked up when I came in, not startled. I had the sense she heard things before most people, not through any supernatural gift, but through a quality of attention that most people had simply never developed. The mountain dialect sections, I said. I wanted to see the original, not the transcription. It was not quite a lie. I did want to see it. She found the place and moved the volume toward me, and I sat down at the other end of the table, and for a while we both worked in the same silence she had built with my daughter, and I understood what Sira had felt that first morning, climbing onto that bench. The silence was not empty. It was the fullest quiet I had sat in a year. She talks to the wolves, Nara said without looking up. Not out loud, but she talks to them. I've watched her face, she's saying something. I know, I said. She used to do the same with her mother's wolf. A pause. She did not offer condolences. I was grateful. Everyone offered condolences, and they were kind, and I was grateful for those too. But her not offering them felt like something different, like she understood that there were some things that did not need language placed around them. She's the most perceptive child I've ever met, she said. She gets it from her mother. Maybe, she turned a page, maybe not only from her mother. I looked at her. She was still looking at the volume. The mark burned, warm and steady at my wrist. It was the 24th evening. I did not plan to be in the East Corridor at that hour. I had been going to the Great Hall for the evening meal, and I had taken the long way, the way that went past the archive, and the door was open, and the fire was lit, and Nara was reading aloud again from the Chronicle. Sira was in her lap. My daughter had settled in there, small and certain, the way she settled against me in the evenings, with the total trust of a child who has decided this is where she is supposed to be, without any doubt at all. Nara's arm was around her, loosely, naturally, the way you hold a child you are not thinking about holding because the holding has simply happened. She was reading the old pack histories, the settlement of the Eastern Valley, the founding of the first holds, her voice low and unhurried. I stopped in the doorway. Nara, read. Sira listened. The fire moved. Then Sira lifted her head. She looked at the page for a moment. Then she looked up at Nara's face, and she looked at her for a long time with that clear, total attention she gave to everything. And then, in a voice so small and unused that it barely moved the air, she said, "Stay." The word fell into the room like the first snow of winter, quiet, inevitable, changing everything. Nara went very still. Her arm tightened gently around Sira, just slightly. And on my wrist, the mate mark ignited, not burning, not pain, but a blazing warmth that went through my chest and down my spine and out through my wolf's whole frame. And my wolf rose fully awake, his head up, his whole body pointed at the door he already knew I was standing in. I stepped into the room. Nara looked up. She saw my face, and whatever she read there was enough. She held my daughter, and she did not look away. "She asked you to stay," I said. "I heard. I'm asking as well." A long moment. The fire. The old volume open on the table. My daughter with her face turned up to watch me, as if she had arranged all of this deliberately, which I would later not entirely discount. The 30 days end in 6 days, Nara said. I know when they end. I'd need to send word to the settlement. There are arrangements. Aldrich will help you send word. He is very good at arrangements. I paused. Tell me what you need. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked down at Sira, who was watching her with an expression of absolute confidence, as if the answer had never been in question. A longer arrangement, she said finally. I think I'd need a longer arrangement. Permanent, I said, if you'll have it. She held my daughter and she breathed once steadily, and then she nodded. She wore no crown at first. She had not asked for one and I had not offered, because I had learned, in those 6 days after the 24th evening, that Nara moved best at her own pace and in her own measure, and the best thing I could do was be present without crowding. She had to write to the settlement. She had to make peace with a life she had understood in one way and now understood differently. She had to learn a hold, a pack, a man who was still in many ways learning to be thawed. Sira did not wait. Sira had made her decision, as she had made all of her decisions since she stopped speaking, in complete silence and absolute certainty. The morning after the archive evening she came down to breakfast and sat beside Nara and said, "Bread," when she wanted the bread, and I sat across from them and felt something in the long center of my grief begin, very carefully, to loosen. She spoke in pieces after that. Practical words first, the words for things she needed, things she wanted to know, things she wanted to tell the wolves. And then more words and then full sentences, low and careful, as if she were relearning a skill she had been resting. By the second week she was speaking to me in the evenings again, the way she had before Myra died, with opinions on everything. She told me Nara read better than anyone, including me. She told me Soot had chosen the archive corner as her permanent post. She told me the 2 young wolves from the western litter were silly, but she forgave them. I held all of it. I held it carefully, the way you hold something you had stopped expecting to have. The pack gave no formal ceremony. That surprised some of the council who had expected pageantry, the announcement, the pack assembly, the traditional claiming rights. But the wolves of Caldenmore had already given their answer, and I had already given mine, and Nara was not a woman who needed something declared in a great hall to know that it was real. What she needed, I had learned, was the daily truth of it, the morning reading, Sira between us at the table, the marked manuscripts exchanged across the corridor, the evenings by the east wing fire. That was her language. I was learning it. The pack understood without announcement, the way packs understand things they have already been told by the wolves. Aldrich had seen Soot's post, the pups at the threshold, Fell's old gift offering at the archive door, and he had drawn the only conclusion available. By the time the council asked their careful questions, Aldrich had already answered them. The Alpha King has chosen, the wolves have confirmed, the child has spoken. The council did not argue with the child. There is a corner in the East Wing that Sira calls hers. She is proprietary about it now, possessive in the way children are about good things they have discovered, and are not prepared to share indiscriminately. She keeps a small reading stand there and 2 wolves, and a particular cushion she brought from her chamber without asking anyone's permission. When I come to the East Wing in the evenings, which I do every evening now, she is usually there, reading or talking to Soot or both. The archive has gone back to being a quiet working room. The catalog is done. Nara reads to her still. Not every evening. Sira is 5 now, and beginning to read her own words, and she has strong feelings about her independence, which she expresses to the wolves in detail. But on the evenings when the pine wind comes down from the north ridge and the hold is cold and the fire is the brightest thing, Sira climbs into her lap, and Nara opens the old chronicles, and I sit at the end of the table and do not pretend to read anything else. The mate mark is warm every hour now, not the burning of that first full ignition that was the bond announcing itself, claiming its moment. What it is now is simpler and I find entirely better, the constant warmth of something that has arrived. My wolf is not withdrawn. He is not restless, not hunting, not hollowed by the wrong season. He is settled, fully present, in the place he has been pointing toward since the morning 3 young wolves sat outside an archive door, and a small gray female looked at me with an expression that, in retrospect, was absolutely not subtle. I had stopped expecting this. I had made a kind of peace with the cold that came after Myra, had decided the mark on my wrist was a thing I would carry without it ever waking, and I had governed my hold and raised my daughter and done everything right and carefully, and at a careful remove. And then a woman with a plain brown cloak and her own bags had come through my gate on a gray morning and not looked up at the walls once, and everything had shifted so quietly that I had almost missed it. Sira is teaching Nara the names of the wolves. She is very precise about the names. There are 43 wolves in the hold's pack and she knows all of them, and she has decided that Nara will also know all of them, and she is thorough in her instruction. I have heard Nara repeat names back to her, seriously, as if it matters to get them right, which Sira tells her it does. It does. I watch them and I think of the chronicles, all those old pack histories she read aloud in the archive, all those records of who founded which hold, who led which crossing, who found their mate in which season and by which sign. The histories I have spent a year behind, at a careful remove, governing and filling the hours. Nara has catalogued all of them now. She has read them through, corrected the transcriptions, marked the uncertain passages, and filed them neatly in the order they were always meant to be in. I find I have no objection to being in the record. I find I have no objection to anything in this warm room in this particular evening, with my daughter's voice rising in the corner with the patient names of wolves, and the fire, and the woman at the table who stayed.